Welcome to Tom Talks. Join me once a week right here on Tom Boley YouTube channel. We're going to break down all the latest and greatest walleye fishing tips, walleye fishing tricks, the absolute location where these fish are right now, and all the practical relevant information you want and need. Hooked up. And look at that, just gone. For all the information you want and need, stay tuned right here once a week, Tom Talks. What is going on, guys? Today we are back with another Tom Talks. It's been a quick minute since we've done one of these. If you guys are unfamiliar with what a Tom Talks is, if this is the first time you're seeing one of these, this is the first time you're watching a video from this channel, what a Tom Talks is, it's basically breaks down a lot of what's going on in walleye fishing right now. A lot of the inside details on a lot of the videos we've done over the course of the past week or so here. Most of the time I do one of these like every week or every couple weeks or something like that. And what we want to talk about today is obviously fall has arrived. I don't know how far south many of you are fishing in walleye country, but fall has absolutely arrived here in northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, everywhere we've been the last week. Very fall out, multiple layers on, bibs on, long underwear on, and fishing fall patterns, which is always fun. I absolutely love fall walleye fishing. I love fall fishing for pretty much anything, but normally you have lakes that are very empty and fish in predictable locations. So today what I want to kind of run down is a few different things. One, kind of where we're seeing fish right now, where we're catching fish, and you know, it's definitely fall out, and we're definitely going to talk about the specifics on kind of those locations and details like that. The second thing we're going to talk about is turnover, which is about to happen on many lakes. What turnover is, what it does to a lot of lakes, kind of what lakes it has the most predominant effect on, and things like that. And kind of the third thing I want to touch on is a recent river fishing walleye video we did. And we'd probably throw in a whole bunch of details on a whole bunch of other topics throughout the course of this video. But it's a great opportunity if you're watching this, it's a great opportunity for me to kind of give you guys a lot of details on what we've been doing the last week. So we're going to jump right into it. That's what we're going to talk about. Number one, we're going to start with where we're seeing fish, where we're catching fish, and what we're catching them on, and kind of why the bite's been slow for us. So my area, we've been fishing a lot of lakes that have water temps like 59 to like 62. And with the exception of the last couple days, these water temps have pretty much been the same in that low 60-degree range for like 3-4 weeks, probably a month now, right? And I think that has a lot to do with why we've been seeing kind of a slower bite here on the inland lakes I've been fishing in northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota. I think we have temps that are like ready to turn over, and they've kind of flatlined, and then it kind of got warm for a little while, and now it's back to getting cold again. We're dropping water temps, which is good, but it's kind of like in the spring. Anytime you have water temps that are like warming up, right? You want that warming trend, you want the water warming up, and you don't want it to like plateau at a very cold water temp for a while, right? And then start to warm up again. You want that progressive warm up. The same thing happens in the fall, right? And what we have happening is the temps started dropping, it got to like the mid 60s, and it just flatlined, and it's just been sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. I have a lot more confidence in how good fishing is going to be and getting bites, and you know, overall having productive fishing for a lot of different things in the fall. Once I get water temps that are in that mid 50-degree range. I really like that mid 50-degree range and lower for me, right? And we just haven't had yet, and I think that's definitely playing into the fact, you know, it has something to do with why we've seen a tougher bite. And we've been muskie fishing, we've been walleye fishing, we've been fishing for a little bit of everything, and we've kind of seen the same thing across the board, right? And it's just been kind of very windowy like fishing, right? You'll go out for 2 days and it'll be like slow fishing, and then one day it'll just be super good, right? And I'm not really sure why that is, but I think that plateau of water temp definitely has something to do with it. But where we're seeing fish is pretty much right where you'd think you should see fish this time of year. They're a little bit more scattered than I'd say they probably normally are, and that next drop in water temp is going to make things really snap, and they're going to be everywhere I think they should be. But basically what we're fishing mostly a deep water pattern for walleyes. And when I say deep water, I always preface that by saying deep water is all relative to how deep your lake is, right? If you fish a system where like the whole basin is 50-60 feet plus, you know, a deep water piece of structure is probably in that 27 to 35 foot range. And in our deeper systems, that's a very popular depth where pretty much I can, you know, look at a lake that has a basin that's that depth, point out humps that are that depth, or point out big, deep, you know, steep points that are that depth, and say there's probably going to be walleyes on a few of these locations, right? And most of the time there is. That's kind of the number one pattern we've been fishing. And a lot of our inland lakes, you know, it's not massive pieces of structure, so a lot of what we're doing is spot fishing. We're either pitching Jigs and minnows, back to those fish. Most time 3/8 ounce Kalen's Google Eyes with like a chub or a bigger sucker minnow on. And I always like fishing these bigger minnows this time of year. It's just much more productive for me than going to like a fathead or something like that. And the other thing we've been doing is we've been kind of fishing like hyper rattles, like your snap jig baits, right? Your speed jigging style of lures. And both have been catching fish. You guys have probably seen us catch more fish on the hyper rattle, and that's because a lot of the lakes, I don't know if we've just had bad timing on stuff we've been going to do, or it's just kind of, you know, you guys chime in on a lot of these YouTube comments and kind of say the same thing, like, oh, it's super slow over here too, it's super slow over here, I'm catching fish doing the same thing, but I'm not catching a lot, you know? And I think it's kind of happening a lot of these places, right? And the reason we've been catching more fish on the hyper rattle, it's more reactionary, right? I don't think for the most part these fish are feeding through long periods of the day. I think it's just kind of, you drop that hyper rattle down on them, they're not super active, you snap it around and you get a bite, right? Or you catch a fish and you kind of move on and do the same thing over and over. And that's kind of been our predominant pattern, kind of no matter where we've gone. So, you know, if you're coming up to fish a deep clear lake, or if you fish a lake that fits those descriptions, definitely be looking in that 27 to like 32 foot range, I would say is a sweet spot. And load up on jigs and live bait, and load up on Acme hyper rattles, or your shiver minnows, or your jig and wraps, or things of that nature. Now, the other thing we filmed a video on this past week is one of my absolute favorite fall bites, right? And we'll air some footage here, but it is my absolute favorite way to fish walleyes in the fall. And I'm not really sure why I like it so much. It's just a lot of fun for me, and that is pitching shallow for fall walleyes. Normally, if you can find fish in shallow water in the fall, they're much more likely to bite. A lot of times those deep fish, no matter what time of year you're fishing, are some of the more finicky fish. I'm not sure why that is, but a lot of times you'll see that pretty much no matter where you go. It seems like those fish that are up shallow are always much more apt to bite. And basically the video we filmed, we were pitching main lake weeds, and we were looking for fish kind of in that 8 to like 14 foot zone, right in the weeds, or right on a weed edge, or right in a void in the weeds, which is a pretty common pattern to fish. And that pattern is really going to get good kind of in the next few weeks here. I'm loving this cold temps we got, because it should spring a lot more life back to the shallows in some lakes, right? And we'll kind of talk about that in a second here, but it's a super fun bite to fish if you haven't fished it. A lot of times if you're fishing like these northern Wisconsin style lakes, these northern Minnesota style lakes, you know, you're not looking for pods of fish that are going to be just like hundreds of fish for really long ways, right? Most of the time what it is you're coming down a weed edge, and you get to like a corner or like a specific spot on that weed edge, and you'll see a side imaging shot that looks something like this, right? You spot lock and you just kind of pitch directly to that area, right? This isn't like a cover a massive amount of water type of pattern. This is like cover this little corner, right? And it's like a very intimate style of fishing, because you're going down a weed edge, like I said, you see that little pocket of fish and you kind of position on them, you spot lock, and you can almost imagine it like, you know, all this weeds in the way, and you're trying to catch the fish out of that one little corner. I think that's one of the reasons I really like that pattern. It's just super fun and a super cool deal to do. You know, that deep water thing, it's obviously, you know, you got to go out and you got to find the fish on sonar, and you know, you end up, you know, sitting on a hump and kind of pitching back kind of all over the hump to where those fish are relating for it. But that shallow water thing is a lot of fun for me. And I mean, everybody loves a jig bite, right? If you walleye fish and you don't like feeling the jig get thumped, there's probably something wrong with you. But that pattern's going to get really good after turnover, and it's starting to happen kind of all over. And it's kind of lake to lake. Some lakes will have a really good one, and some lakes won't. But we'll talk about that in a second here, as we kind of get into talking about turnover and what turnover is and what it kind of does to fish, right? And basically what turnover is obviously, you know, in the early summer, a lot of times you have a thermocline set up. And basically what that is, it's colder, denser water down on the bottom, which is less oxygenated. And then on the top you have warmer water, right? And these fish pretty much live in the warmer water. I mean, there's some types of fish that'll obviously go deeper, like your whitefish, or, you know, sometimes your ciscoes, or your trout style, you know, fish like that. But for the most part, your walleye and pretty much everything we're fishing for stays, you know, in that warmer water this time of year, right? And it's about to turn over, and a lot of times when you see it, it will be like when the water is like 60 to like 55. And a lot of days, you know, if you get a real big wind, it'll kind of flip it over and mix it up, and then you're talking about a whole totally different, you know, fishery after that, right? And it's like I said, it's pretty much about to happen, just based on our water temps and based how long they've been the same. My guess is this week we'll see a whole bunch of lakes turn over here in northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota. But what you have, and it affects a deep bite more than a shallow bite, and affects some lakes more than others. If your whole lake is like 20 2 feet deep in the basin, you're probably not going to have a turnover, right? Now, if you have a lake where you have a lot of deep water, like 30 plus, you're probably going to have a turnover. And in some lakes, like your big reservoirs, you might have sections of that reservoir that are very like rivery, right? And then you might have sections of it that are more like a lake, right? So you might have a thermocline develop, and you might have a turnover affect fish that are in a big basin of a reservoir versus fish like in a more rivery or shallower section of that lake. There won't be a turnover, right? So kind of keep those things in mind too. But basically what it does is, like, let's say you have all these fish setting up in deep water right now in like 30, 32 feet, right? And you don't see any fish really deeper than that. A lot of times that's because that's where that line is at, right? And when it flips over, what you have happen is just a big mixing of water. Those fish can be in the bottom in 55 feet, or they can be in 4 feet of water on a weed edge, right? And some lakes will develop, they'll kind of keep that good deep bite, but they'll also be fished very deep, right? And I don't like fishing for those fish that are like, 40, 50 feet deep, 60 feet deep. It's kind of an old school pattern that a lot of guys still fish. If you're going out just to keep fish, that's one thing to fish that pattern, but most of my fishing is obviously catch and release. So I don't fish a whole lot of that really deep pattern. But the other thing that you have happen is, because it mixes and those fish can be anywhere, is a lot of times you have a resurgence back to shallow water this time of year, which is a good thing if you like fishing shallow water. And you guys will definitely be seeing a lot more of us pitching shallow water. Now, where are kind of the two spots we fish a lot of shallow water? One, we kind of already talked about it. When you have this big resurgence of fish back to the shallows, weeds are an incredibly popular thing to fish in the fall. And a lot of times what I'm looking for is, big structures that a lot of times will come out of bays, right? And a lot of times these big structures that come out of bays, you'll have just a ton of life pushed back into some of them. And you might look at like 2 of these spots, and one will have nothing. It won't have like any bait life. It won't have like any panfish around, and there won't be any walleyes there. And you might look at another one, and those weeds might be super healthy, and there might be bait, skipping all over in the weeds right up on top of stuff. And there might be, smallmouth busting on those, and then walleyes on the edge, and crappies over here. And it's kind of spot to spot. Weeds in the spring a lot of times, or shallow water in the spring, is normally, you'll have many more productive areas, where your fall shallow water spots are much more kind of like isolated for the most part, right? And I don't really know why that is. Might have something to do with weed life. It might have something to do with, there's a split bite. There might be fish deep and fish shallow, so only the best shallow water spots have fish on them, things like that. But all you can really do is just drive around and look at that stuff, right? And I love fishing the shallow water bite. Like I said, it's super fun, and it's about to get real good here in the future. And after turnover, I like to look at it as one of the most stable times of the year, right? And the reason I say that is because turnover's over, right? In a week or so here, and basically what you have happen is slowly declining water temperatures until the water is obviously frozen, right? And it's a very stable time of year to fish. Most of the time, when you're finding fish like 2 weeks from now, they almost don't move. They'll almost stay there until the lake is frozen a lot of times. And a lot of times those shallow spots and deep spots are a lot of times your first good ice fishing spots, right? So there's a lot of stability that comes with fishing late in the year. And especially when you start getting water temps kind of below 50, because normally it's a very slow, gradual cool down all the way into the end of November, right? And super fun year to fish. Most of the time the lakes are empty. Now, one thing I don't talk about a lot in turnover is like all the scientific parts of it, right? Why is life here? Why is life there? I don't really know, and I don't really care. But a lot of times what you'll see is you can kind of tell when it'll happen, because your lake, if you're fishing a clear lake, it'll get real dingy. Or another telltale is if you fish that lake a lot and you go out and all of a sudden you're like, there's no fish on any of my spots today, right? That's a big telltale. The lake turned over and something massive changed, right? And a lot of times it's time to start looking at, something different, like that shallow water thing. Or you can go out and look in very deep water, right? Now there's kind of another shallow water location in which we look a lot in fall. And I primarily look at these areas at night, or if there's a big wind, and that is shallow rock, right? And a lot of times it's hard to get on this pattern if you don't have a lot of confidence doing it. It's much easier on like very big lakes, like your Leech Lake, your Mille Lacs, your things like that. And a lot of times it's kind of highlighted by like that full moon bite in like October, right? And a lot of times, like I said, it's about big wind or fishing at night. And a lot of times I think those fish are kind of roaming around. You get that big wind, they're up there, and then at night they also come up shallow, right? And a lot of times we're looking for like big rock flats or big rock humps, and a lot of times it's a shoreline related bite. And you have a lot of life coming back to the shoreline at this time of year. And a lot of times we're either trolling is one of my favorite ways to do it, you know, putting out the boards, putting out shallow stick baits and covering a lot of that big shallow water. Or the other thing we do is pitch plastics or big jigs and suckers to kind of like the key points of these rock structures at night, right? And that's a super fun bite too. It's kind of lake to lake, you know, some lakes might not have it, some lakes will have it, but if you're fishing a bigger system, there's likely going to be a good shallow rock bite, kind of from here on out deep into the fall. And that's a super fun one to fish, and you guys will definitely see us fishing some of that pattern too. But I always say there's kind of a movement of fish, right? In the spring, obviously, you know, in May and April, your fish are up shallow on a shoreline. In June, July, they progressively push out. August, they're normally out deep. September, they're normally kind of there's a few fish starting to move back shallow. And then October, you normally have some fish that'll stay out deep, some fish that'll end up back shallow, and that'll kind of stay like that into you know, till the lake really freezes. So that's kind of the way a lot of times I like to look at a lot of these seasonal bites, right? And the same thing, you know, like I said, it's happening right now. There's fish definitely sliding back into shallow water. Each day we're going out, we're seeing more and more of that. And after turnover, it's only going to get stronger and stronger. So that's just kind of my take on turnover. Do you make a massive bait change? No, it's the same baits that always catch walleyes will catch walleyes. It's just getting around them can be a little bit more difficult for a few days right after that turnover, right? So the next thing I want to talk about is we recently filmed a river fishing video. Now, I have very, very minimal experience fishing river systems anytime other than early spring, really. And none of that really applies to right now. So we recently went down to the St. Croix River. We fished from Stillwater down to Prescott, and I just kind of fished some of the more obvious things to fish. But I had a ton of fun doing that, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. I think we posted it yesterday, yeah. And we caught some walleyes, we caught some saugers. It was nothing crazy or fancy, but it was a lot of fun to do something just totally different, and that's what we were doing. So basically some of the details on that video, the predominant pattern we got on was trolling lead core. And basically what we were doing is we were looking for big pieces of structure close to neck downs for the most part, or big channel points that came out into the channel from the shoreline, right? And if you fish a river system, they're littered with structure and everything just looks good. And you know, there's just kind of endless possibilities on where fish can be. I think it's much more up in the air as far as, you know, depth ranges in which those fish can be at. And basically, like I said, what we were doing is we were trolling lead core. And one big thing whenever I like to troll lead core is I like to go into the current. And one reason I like to troll into the current, no matter what time of year I'm fishing a river system, is because I can go slower and get more action out of my bait, right? Which is a big thing, especially when the water's cold, like in the spring or the fall, right? Now in the summer, when those fish are really chasing, you can go downstream probably a little bit more, and I think you can fluctuate that speed and be going much faster to get bites. A lot of times in the fall, I think if you're going into current, obviously that crankbait can run slower at a slower speed and still have action like it's going fast, which is obviously a good thing. And we were trolling a lot of shad style baits, and we were kind of sticking to that 18 to like 25 foot zone. And you know, if we were fishing like and a lot of times it's kind of dictated by the spot, right? If we were fishing a really big neck down and it was like, you know, 5 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet, and then it'd go boom down to 27, then we'd be fishing in 27. We weren't trying to stick like right on that wall of a break line, right? Now if we had a big channel point that came out and it was real flat kind of all the way out to 35 feet, then we'd kind of fluctuate that depth a little bit more, right? And basically what we were doing is we'd make a pass going up it, and like let's say we saw a whole bunch, you know, most of the fish we were seeing on side imaging were in shallower water than what we were at. Well, in the next pass we just come back and go a little bit shallower, right? And when you're fishing a river, it's not like fishing a lake up here where, you know, you're looking at your side imaging and you're like, oh, there's a pot of fish, they're probably walleyes, right? In a river system, you're just looking at life, right? A lot of times I don't have enough experience on rivers to say like, you know, this is exactly where walleyes should set up. I see fish on side imaging, they're probably walleyes, right? You just have so many different kinds of fish. I mean, you have huge balls of shad, you have, you know, obviously like suckers and white bass and sheep's head and all these different kinds of fish that a lot of times will be using the same pieces of structure. So a lot of times what we're basically looking for is just a lot of life somewhere, right? And hoping that there's probably some walleyes or saugers in that stuff. And that was basically what we did. The other thing we tried to do was jig a lot of these neck downs. Now I've kind of sort of done some research since I've come back from this trip, and what I think happens is I think the neck down thing's a very good thing to fish, probably all times of year, but I think it probably is very good in the spring, obviously, for a shallow water bite. Obviously, walleyes like spawning around current. Obviously, in a neck down where you have this big river system that comes down and comes down real tight and then opens back up, you have a lot of current in these neck downs, right? Because you got a big river system coming through a very small pinch point. And I think it's probably really good in the spring. I think it's probably really good late in the fall. I think we're probably a little too early to see that really good neck down bite for now, but I think, I mean, who knows, right? I don't know. That's just kind of from the research I've done, what I've seen. So if you guys fish a lot of rivers, let me know on this one. And I think, you know, we were kind of fishing, you know, like I said, we were fishing this pattern. We were trolling cranks basically up current outside on some of these big flats outside of these neck downs and channel points, and I think a lot of those fish will end up getting, you know, much closer into those neck downs as the season goes on. But I had a ton of fun on the river. It was a super fun day just to see something different, do something different. I fished that river a lot for muskies in my life. I've just never fished it for walleyes really, so that was very interesting and very fun, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And we'll definitely be back to do some more river stuff, whether that's Mississippi or St. Croix or St. Louis. I have no idea, but we're gonna go somewhere and do some more rivers, definitely later into the fall here. So yeah, that's gonna kind of wrap up this little Tom Talks video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this. It's just kind of a wrap up where fish are, what we're catching them on, and stuff like that. This week I've fished everywhere from northern Wisconsin kind of all the way over to Eagle River. I've fished the Minocqua area, I've fished the Hayward area, and now I have fished the St. Croix. So I've kind of driven a line east to west across northern Wisconsin and fished a whole bunch of different systems. So that's kind of the wrap up on this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching it. Hopefully there's some good information in here. I got to take this camera stuff out of the boat. We're going to clean the boat today and then go back out this afternoon, hopefully get some more videos done. So appreciate you guys watching. If you're not yet, please subscribe. Stay tuned for more content, and we'll see you guys next time.